Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. You've given us some fascinating excerpts from Kanban Change Leadership.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're ready to move past just the Kanban basics and really explore how this system can actually transform company culture and leadership.
Indeed, your source material really digs into those deeper aspects.
Okay.
Going beyond, just the mechanics of visualizing work and managing flow.
Yeah, and one of the things that immediately caught my eye was the connection to the Toyota production system.
Right.
It's not something you typically associate with knowledge work.
It's an intriguing parallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Both systems share this core principle,
Okay.
empowering those closest to the work to drive continuous improvement.
Right.
But what's fascinating is how that translates from a manufacturing setting to the world of knowledge work.
So for someone who's already familiar with the basics of Kanban boards and work in progress limits, what's the key takeaway here? How does this link to the Toyota production system change our understanding of Kanban?
It shifts the focus from simply getting things done to cultivating a mindset of relentless improvement. It's not just about moving tickets across a board.
Right.
It's about constantly questioning, experimenting, and refining the way you work.
Yeah.
And that, as you'll see in these readings, has profound implications for leadership and company culture.
That's a great point. So let's talk about visualization.
Sure.
The book really hammers this home.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, the analogy of the team comparing their workflow to a motorway on their Kanban board really resonated with me.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we're all just stuck in traffic sometimes, even with our work.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? But beyond just creating a visual representation of your work.
Right.
What's important is how it changes the way teams collaborate and solve problems.
Right, because you're not just looking at individual tasks anymore.
Yeah.
You're seeing the entire flow of work and how it all connects.
Exactly. And that shared understanding is crucial for identifying bottlenecks, anticipating problems, and making better decisions as a team. Think of it as a shared mental model that helps everyone get on the same page.
Okay. I'm starting to see how that deeper level of understanding can lead to more effective problem solving. But let's get back to the idea of limiting work in progress.
Sure.
Or WIP.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit counterintuitive? I mean, don't we want people to be as busy as possible?
That's a common misconception. And it goes back to the old factory floor mentality of maximizing utilization.
Yeah.
But in knowledge work, especially in creative fields, that kind of thinking can actually be detrimental.
So you're saying that having some slack in the system is actually a good thing?
Absolutely. When you limit WIP, you're not just preventing overload. You're creating the space for deeper focus and more creative problem solving.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you're juggling multiple tasks, your attention is fragmented and the quality of your work suffers. But when you can zero in on a single task, you enter what psychologists call a flow state, where you're more engaged, more productive, and more likely to come up with innovative solutions.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about efficiency, it's about effectiveness.
Exactly.
You're creating an environment where people can do their best work. Not just their busiest work.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key concept in Kanban. Classes of service. Because, let's face it, not all work items are created equal.
Right. You might have an urgent bug fix that needs to be addressed immediately.
Yeah.
While a new feature request can wait a bit longer.
Precisely. And this is where classes of service can get tricky. It's not just about slapping a label on a task and calling it a day. You need to define clear policies for each class.
Manage expectations and ensure that expedited work doesn't disrupt the overall flow.
So you're saying there's a real art to implementing classes of service effectively?
Absolutely. And the book dives into some of those challenges, offering practical advice on how to balance competing priorities without creating chaos in your workflow.
I'm definitely seeing how Kanban goes beyond just the mechanics. It forces you to think critically about your workflow, your priorities, and how you manage different types of work. But the thing that really intrigues me is the emphasis on the human element. The idea that Kanban can actually transform company culture.
That's what makes Kanban so compelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a system for managing tasks.
Right.
It's a framework for fostering a culture of continuous improvement. And that requires a fundamental shift in leadership style.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this link between Kanban and leadership.
Well, the readings highlight this idea of moving away from a traditional hierarchical model of leadership. Okay. Where decisions are made at the top and handed down toward a more collaborative, decentralized approach.
Okay.
They call it leadership as a team sport.
Okay.
Which I find to be a brilliant analogy.
I love that.
Yeah.
It suggests a sense of shared responsibility.
Yeah.
Where everyone is empowered to contribute and make a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as we all know, change can be incredibly difficult.
Right.
People are often resistant to new ways of working.
Yeah.
Especially when it challenges the status quo. So how does Kanban address that?
That's a great question. And there was this really interesting anecdote in the book about a Hungarian military unit that got lost in the Alps.
Ah, yes. A powerful illustration of the importance of sense-making in change management.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that term.
Sure.
Break it down for me.
Essentially, sense-making is the process of creating meaning out of a situation.
Okay.
It's about understanding why things are happening, what it means for you, and how you fit into the bigger picture.
And in the context of Kanban adoption, it's about helping people understand the rationale behind the change.
Okay.
The benefits it offers and how their roles will evolve.
So it's not just about telling people to do things differently.
Right.
It's about helping them make sense of the change, buy into it.
Precisely. And that requires a high level of empathy, communication, and a willingness to address people's concerns head on.
Which brings us back to leadership. It seems like successful Kanban implementation requires leaders who are not just technically savvy, but also emotionally intelligent.
That's a great insight.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture where people feel safe to experiment, learn from mistakes, and continuously improve.
Okay, this is all starting to come together.
Good.
But let's get practical for a moment.
Sure.
For someone who's ready to start putting Kanban into practice, what's the most important piece of advice from these readings?
Don't try to boil the ocean.
Okay.
Start small. Focus on a specific problem or area of your workflow and experiment.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a great reminder to keep things manageable and not get overwhelmed by trying to do everything at once.
And remember, Kanban is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It's about building a system that can adapt and evolve as your needs change.
Okay, I'm ready to dive deeper.
Great.
What are some of the key steps involved in actually implementing Kanban?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And we'll be exploring that in more detail in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay.
But before we move on, let me leave you with one more thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If Kanban is all about empowering those closest to the work, what does that mean for traditional notions of management and control?
Ooh.
We'll pick that up next time.
Okay, I can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into Kanban. We've unpacked the principles and the philosophy behind this system.
Right.
But now let's shift gears and get into the nitty-gritty of putting it into practice. It seems like you're eager to move from theory to action. And the next section of your source material, Kanban Change Leadership, offers a roadmap for just that.
You're right. The book goes beyond just explaining Kanban and delves into the practical steps of implementing it within a company.
Okay.
And I'm curious, as someone who clearly enjoys taking action, what stood out to you in this section?
Well, I was a bit surprised that the first step isn't actually creating a Kanban board.
Okay.
The book emphasizes this idea of general clarification as a crucial foundation. It seems counterintuitive to spend time on clarifying things before diving into the actual setup.
It might seem that way.
Yeah.
But think of it like laying the groundwork for a building.
Oh, okay.
You wouldn't just start stacking bricks without a solid plan, would you?
Right. Right.
This initial clarification phase ensures everyone understands the why behind Kanban, what you're hoping to achieve, and the specific context of your organization.
So it's about getting everyone on the same page from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But what does that entail? What kind of things need to be clarified?
The book outlines two key areas.
Okay.
The method itself and the organizational context.
Okay.
Starting with the method, it's about clearing up any misconceptions or preconceived notions about Kanban.
Right.
For instance, some people might mistakenly think it's just another version of the waterfall method, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right, because Kanban is a pull system.
Yeah.
It embraces flexibility and adaptability.
Exactly.
Whereas waterfall is much more rigid and linear.
Exactly. It's important to emphasize that Kanban is a framework that can be tailored to fit the unique needs of your team and the type of work you do.
Right.
And that leads us to the second area of clarification, the organizational context.
Okay, so this is where we start looking at the people involved and how they might be impacted by this change.
Precisely. You need to identify your stakeholders, understand their interests, and anticipate their potential reactions to Kanban.
Right.
The book provides some interesting tools for doing this.
Okay.
Like the personal retrospective and the team constellation exercise.
Well, sound intriguing. What exactly is a personal retrospective?
It's an opportunity for individuals to reflect on their own experiences and perspectives related to the work process.
Okay.
It encourages people to ask themselves questions like, what's been working well for me?
Oh,
what hasn't? What am I hoping to change?
So it's about encouraging self-awareness and personal accountability, even before the Kanban system is in place.
Exactly. It helps people connect with the why behind Kanban on a personal level, rather than just seeing it as another top-down initiative.
Right. And then there's the team constellation exercise,
Yeah.
which takes a more visual approach.
It's a fascinating exercise where you use objects to represent different team members and arrange them in a way that reflects the power dynamics and relationships within the team. Okay.
It's a bit like creating a living org chart, but with more nuance.
I see. So it's a way to visualize the human landscape of the team and anticipate how different individuals might react to the introduction of Kanban.
You got it. It helps you identify potential champions, skeptics, and those who might need more support during the transition.
This is brilliant.
Yeah.
It seems like Kanban Change Leadership is as much about understanding people as it is about understanding the system itself.
Yeah.
But once you've done this groundwork, how do you actually start winning people over to the idea of Kanban?
Communication is key.
Okay.
The book highlights the importance of what they call the change dialogue, which is a series of conversations aimed at fostering understanding, addressing concerns, and building buy-in.
This resonates with what we discussed earlier about sense-making.
Yeah.
It's not just about telling people what to do.
Right.
It's about engaging them in a meaningful dialogue about the change. Exactly. And the book breaks this change dialogue down into 3 distinct stages. Understanding confrontation and objectification.
Okay. Those terms sound a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
What do they actually mean in this context?
Don't worry. They're not as scary as they sound.
Okay.
The understanding stage is all about empathy.
Okay.
It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, listening attentively to their perspective and acknowledging their feelings.
Even if you don't agree with them.
Especially if you don't agree with them.
Okay.
Remember, the goal here is to build bridges, not walls.
Okay. I can see how that would be crucial for diffusing potential resistance.
Yeah.
But what about confrontation? That sounds a bit more intense.
Again, the term might be misleading.
Okay.
It's not about being aggressive or argumentative.
Okay.
It's about respectfully challenging assumptions and presenting your own perspective.
So it's about having an open and honest discussion.
Yeah.
Even if it gets a little uncomfortable.
Precisely. You might say something like, I understand your concerns about Kanban potentially stifling creativity, but here's why I think it could actually have the opposite effect.
Okay. I can see how that would shift the conversation from a defensive stance to a more collaborative one.
Exactly.
And then there's the final stage, objectification. What's that about?
This is where you start to find common ground.
Okay.
You summarize the key points of the discussion, identify areas of agreement, and come up with concrete action steps that everyone can support.
So it's about turning the conversation into tangible outcomes.
Yeah.
Not just letting it fade away without any clear next steps.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes the importance of documentation here.
Okay.
Write down the agreements, the action steps, the next steps.
Right.
This creates a sense of shared understanding and accountability.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the conversation and forget to capture those key decisions.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to these individual change dialogues, the book also talks about the importance of team conversations and retrospectives.
Absolutely. Once you've had those initial one-on-one conversations, it's time to bring the team together. To share feedback, discuss concerns, and start co-creating a shared vision for how Kanban will work in their specific context.
And this is where things start to get really practical.
Yeah.
You're moving from abstract concepts to concrete applications.
Right. The team can start brainstorming specific workflows, identifying potential bottlenecks, and even experimenting with different ways to visualize their work.
And I imagine the retrospective plays a crucial role in this process.
Absolutely.
Providing a dedicated time for reflection and continuous improvement.
It's an opportunity for the team to step back, assess what's working and what isn't, and make adjustments to their Kanban system.
Okay, so we've covered the individual conversations, the team discussions, the retrospectives. It seems like we're building momentum here. But there's one crucial group we haven't talked about yet. The stakeholders.
Right. And engaging them effectively is vital for the success of your Kanban initiative. The book suggests a few powerful tools for this, including the stakeholder map and the stakeholder interview.
I'm intrigued. Let's start with the stakeholder map. What's the purpose of that?
It's a visual tool for identifying and understanding your stakeholders. You plot them on a grid based on their level of interest in the Kanban initiative and their level of power or influence.
So it's about understanding who your champions are? Who might be skeptical, and who has the authority to make things happen.
Exactly. It helps you tailor your communication and engagement strategies accordingly. You wouldn't approach a high-interest stakeholder the same way you would approach someone with low power and low interest.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being strategic with your communication. And making sure you're targeting the right people with the right message. And then there's the stakeholder interview. What's the goal there?
It's about going deeper than just a surface-level understanding of their position on Kanban. You're seeking to gain insights into their perspectives, their needs, and their expectations regarding the implementation.
So it's more than just presenting them with a fait accompli. You're actively seeking their input and feedback.
You're involving them in the process from the outset. And remember, these interviews shouldn't just be a one-time thing. You should be having ongoing conversations with your stakeholders throughout the Kanban journey.
That makes sense. It's about building relationships, not just checking boxes.
Exactly. Now, once you've gathered all this valuable feedback from your stakeholders, what's the next step?
Well, the book talks about the importance of a stakeholder workshop. But I'm curious to know how it differs from the initial team discussions we talked about earlier.
That's a great question. While the team discussions focused on getting everyone on board and building a shared understanding, the stakeholder workshop is where you bring all the pieces together and start co-creating a Kanban system that works for everyone.
So it's about moving from general alignment to specific solutions.
Precisely. The book emphasizes that the facilitator of this workshop should be skilled in guiding the conversation, encouraging participation, and ensuring that everyone feels heard.
I imagine that's crucial, especially when you have stakeholders with different perspectives and priorities.
Absolutely. It's about creating a safe space for open and honest discussion where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas and concerns.
Now, in terms of the actual process, are there different approaches to running this stakeholder workshop?
Yes. The book highlights two main options. Feedback through the Kanban sponsor and feedback from the stakeholders themselves.
I'm curious to know more about these different approaches. What are the key distinctions?
In the first approach, the Kanban sponsor, the person championing the initiative presents the feedback they've gathered from the interviews and guides the discussion based on that information.
So it's a more structured approach. With the sponsor acting as a conduit between the stakeholders and the design process.
The second approach is more organic. The stakeholders themselves take the lead, sharing their perspectives directly and co-creating solutions based on their collective knowledge.
So it's more about self-organization and emergent design.
You got it. Relying on the wisdom of the group to shape the system.
And the best approach will depend on the specific context of your organization and the stakeholders involved. Some groups might thrive in a more structured environment, while others might prefer a more fluid collaborative approach.
That makes sense. So let's say you've successfully navigated all these steps.
Yeah.
You've clarified your goals, engaged your stakeholders, and facilitated a collaborative workshop.
Okay.
Now you're ready to actually start designing the Kanban system itself, right?
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's where the book really gets into the nuts and bolts of creating your Kanban board, defining your workflow, and setting up the mechanics of your system.
Exactly.
But before we dive into those details, let me ask you, given everything we've discussed about the human element of Kanban, do you think traditional project management methodologies are becoming obsolete? That's a really thought-provoking question to leave hanging before we dive into the actual system design.
Right.
Our traditional project management methods on their way out.
Right.
I'm eager to hear your take on that after we unpack this next section.
I'm happy to share my thoughts, but let's first walk through this crucial phase.
Okay.
The system design workshop. It's where all that prep work we discussed culminates in a tangible Kanban system.
From your notes, it seems like this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
The point where theory transforms into practice.
Absolutely. But there's a critical point the book emphasizes before diving into the specific activities. The team needs to own this design process.
Right.
It can't be dictated by some external expert or consultant.
Right, because imposing a system from the top down almost guarantees it won't work. People need to be invested in it.
Exactly.
To feel like it's their way of working.
Exactly. Remember that example from the book about Peter Dunkel?
Oh, yeah.
The manager who tried to create the perfect Kanban system in isolation?
Oh, poor Peter. He spent weeks meticulously crafting this elaborate system only to have his team completely reject it.
His story is a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It highlights how crucial it is to involve the people who will actually be using the system in the design process. Otherwise, you end up with a solution that looks great on paper, but fails to address the team's real needs and challenges.
It's a great reminder that Kanban is fundamentally about collaboration and empowerment.
Exactly.
It's not control and micromanagement. So let's walk through this system design workshop step by step.
Okay.
What's the first order of business?
The starting point is identifying the work item types.
Okay.
These are the granular units of work that flow through the system.
Okay.
Think of them as the building blocks of your workflow.
And this builds on what we've already discussed.
Yes.
About understanding stakeholder needs and mapping out the overall flow of work.
Right. Precisely. The book recommends a very visual approach for this step. Instead of getting bogged down in abstract definitions.
Right.
The team creates clusters of work items on a board grouping similar tasks together.
So you might have clusters for bug fixes, feature requests, customer support issues, and so on.
Exactly. And it's not just about labeling them.
Right.
The team also needs to delve deeper and clarify the policies for handling each type of work item.
Okay.
How will they be prioritized? Who's responsible for them? What are the criteria for completion?
I see. This is about establishing a shared understanding of not just what work needs to be done, but how it will flow through the system.
Exactly.
It's like creating a set of rules for the game.
That's a great analogy. And once you've established those rules, the next step is to define the workflow itself.
Okay.
This is where the Kanban board starts to take shape.
Okay, so now it's time to break down that big picture of work flowing through the system into distinct steps or stages.
Right. And again, the book emphasizes a collaborative visual approach.
Okay.
The team might use Post-it notes to represent different steps and arrange them on a board, creating columns for each stage of the workflow.
And this is where things can get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because different teams will have different workflows.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all template.
Absolutely. The book talks about the importance of finding the right level of detail or scale for the board. A support team might have a simple workflow with just a few stages, like to do, doing, and done. But a software development team might have a much more complex process with multiple stages, substages, and feedback loops.
It's about tailoring the Kanban board to the specific needs of the team and the type of work they do.
Exactly.
And once that workflow is visually mapped out, it's time to start talking about those infamous WIP limits, right?
Exactly. Now that you can see the workflow laid out in front of you, you can start to identify potential bottlenecks and determine how many work items can be in progress at each stage without overloading the system.
Which brings us back to the theory of constraints.
Right.
And the importance of optimizing flow.
Right. It's about finding the right balance.
Okay.
Too few items in progress, and you're not utilizing your team's capacity effectively.
Right.
But too many, and you create bottlenecks that slow down the entire workflow.
And I remember the book emphasized that there's no magic formula.
Right.
For determining those WIP limits.
Yeah.
It's a process of experimentation and observation.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
The team needs to be empowered to adjust those limits as they learn and the work evolves.
Right.
It's not about setting arbitrary numbers and sticking to them rigidly.
Right.
It's about finding what works best for the team and the specific context of their work.
Okay, so we've got the work item types.
Yeah.
The workflow, the WIP limits.
Right.
What's next on the system design agenda?
It's time to factor in classes of service.
Okay.
Remember, not all work items are created equal.
Right.
Some tasks are mission critical, while others can wait a bit longer.
Right, like that urgent bug fix versus a new feature request.
Exactly.
That's planned for next quarter.
Exactly. So in this stage of the workshop, the team defines their classes of service.
Okay.
And determines how to allocate their capacity across those different classes.
So they might have a standard class for routine tasks.
Right.
An expedite class for urgent issues.
Yeah.
And a fixed delivery date class for projects with specific deadlines.
Right. And for each class, they'll need to establish clear policies. What are the WIP limits for each class?
Mm-hmm.
What are the expected timeframes for completion? What are the escalation procedures if something gets stuck?
This is where the real nuance of Kanban comes into play, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about moving things across the board.
Right.
It's about creating a system that can handle different types of work with different levels of urgency and impact.
Exactly. And it requires careful thought and planning to make sure those different classes of service work together harmoniously without creating chaos in your workflow.
So to recap, we've got a Kanban board with a defined workflow, WIP limits for each stage, and classes of service to prioritize different types of work.
Right.
Is there anything else we need to consider at this stage?
There's one more crucial element, metrics.
Okay.
How will the team measure progress and identify areas for improvement?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Because what gets measured gets managed, as the saying goes.
Precisely. But the book stresses that it's not about tracking individual performance.
Right.
Kanban is a team sport. Remember, It's about measuring the performance of the system as a whole.
So it's about asking questions like, how long does it take for work items to move through the system? Where are the bottlenecks?
Right.
Are we meeting our service level agreements?
Exactly. And the beauty of Kanban is that it makes those metrics visible.
Right.
You can literally see the flow of work on the board.
Yeah.
Which makes it much easier to identify areas for improvement.
And the book recommends focusing on a few key metrics to start with.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to track everything under the sun.
Right, because analysis paralysis is the enemy of progress.
Yeah.
Start with the metrics that are most relevant to your goals.
Okay.
And refine them as you go.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've designed our workflow, set our WIP limits, defined our classes of service, and even identified our key metrics.
Right.
Are we ready to go live with our Kanban system?
Almost. There's one final stage of the workshop that the book recommends, concluding the system design.
I'm curious about this stage.
Yeah.
What does it entail?
It's about taking a step back and simulating the entire Kanban system.
Okay.
Walking through different scenarios and identifying any potential issues or areas for improvement. It's like a dress rehearsal before the big opening night.
So you might say, okay, let's imagine an urgent bug comes in.
Right.
How would we handle that within our system?
Exactly.
What if we get a sudden influx of new feature requests?
Right.
How would that impact our workflow?
Exactly. It's a chance to test the system before it goes live and make any necessary adjustments.
That's brilliant. It's like a final quality check to make sure everything is running smoothly.
And it's also a time for the team to celebrate their accomplishment.
Yeah.
They've just designed their own way of working.
That's a huge achievement.
It is.
And this system design workshop is just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
The real magic of Kanban is in the continuous improvement.
Absolutely. The team will need to have regular retrospectives review their metrics, adjust their WIP limits, and continue to evolve their system as they learn and the work changes.
Right. It's not about finding the perfect system.
Right.
It's about embracing a mindset of continuous learning and improvement.
Exactly. And that brings us back to your earlier question about whether traditional project management methodologies are becoming obsolete.
Okay.
I think Kanban's emphasis on flexibility, adaptability, and continuous improvement offers a compelling alternative in today's rapidly changing work environment.
I'm inclined to agree with you. The world of work is becoming increasingly complex and unpredictable.
Yeah.
And traditional methods often struggle to keep up.
Yeah.
Kanban, with its focus on visualizing work, limiting WIP, and empowering teams, seems much better suited to this new reality.
It's not about throwing out all the traditional tools and techniques, but rather about finding the right approach for the specific context of your work. And in many cases, Kanban offers a powerful framework for navigating complexity and achieving sustainable success.
So there you have it, your personalized deep dive into Kanban for continuous improvement.
There you go.
We've explored the principles, the practices, and the potential of this system to transform not just your workflow, but your entire work culture.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
And as you embark on your own Kanban journey, remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
That's right.
Embrace the mindset of continuous learning, experimentation, and improvement. And you might be surprised by what you discover along the way.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Maybe you'll be the next John Harrison. Revolutionizing the way we work with your groundbreaking innovations.
That's the goal.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.